Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm John Woolstone, one of the co-directors of the Village of Lovers, and I'm so grateful for you to be here for this talk today around love and liberation. Really, a different path forward for peace. I've been seeing some of you in the chat. We're so grateful to have you from Scotland and Italy and Jordan and Jerusalem and all over this beautiful planet here to really listen in to some dear friends of mine that I'm excited to welcome in now. So I have the great honor and privilege to welcome three of my friends who I've met while filming the Village of Lovers at Tamera over the past years. The first is Sami Awad, who is the director of the Holy Land Trust, who is coming in from Bethlehem, Palestine, and has been a peace worker for a very long time. Next, I have Ida Shibley, who is a indigenous Bedouin woman who is currently living at Tamera. And alongside her, we have Erie Ayalon, who is a Israeli who has been living in Tamera for about the last decade. So we'll love to welcome Ida and Sami and Uri in now. Welcome, Sami. Welcome. All right. Thank you both. Thank you, all of you, for being here. It's an honor.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. And I know this has been a immense time, the past few months, going on the past few years and really decades. And for actually a long time going back in history with this sense of conflict that is going on in the Fertile Crescent, in the place that many of us know as the Holy Land. And each of you hail from there. And actually the first question that I wanted to ask, because we all know there's a lot going on there now, and we all know that you're coming here as peace workers. But a question that was raised to me by many people in preparation for this talk was, how were you raised? What was the narrative you were raised with growing up? Was it always a narrative of peace, or what was your journey from that narrative you were raised with to becoming a peace worker? Maybe we could start with Ida and then go over to Sami and then Uri. Oh, and actually, thank you. And I also forgot, Ida, I also want to invite you, before we begin, to begin with actually a prayer.
Thank you, John. And thank you, everybody, for being here. And I will start with a prayer also. Before answering any question, I'm delighted to see so many people registering. And before any words coming out, I would like to invite whoever feels comfortable to take your right hand, the hand of action, and bring it to your heart. If you feel comfortable with this gesture, and take a breath. Just this image of so many of us now, pillars of light, inshallah, on the body of Mother Earth, taking one conscious breath together. It's already calming my nervous system. And with this gesture, my prayer goes to first invite my ancestors who are, inshallah, standing behind me, and the future generations in front of me, coming from my womb and other wombs, and asking into this space that may this hour of time that we are gathering be of service for life. And I invite each one of you, if you feel comfortable, to invite to the space that you are in your ancestors, whether you know them or not, proud of them or not, acknowledge them or not. Invite them to the space. And I invite each one of us to take our true position in life, to be stewards of life, and to take this moment of time to know that whatever thought, feeling, movement in us has an influence. So this huge responsibility, I invite myself and you to make it as a commitment, as a ceremony for this moment, to be conscious what thoughts comes through your head, or if you think from your heart, what feeling, and to be witness for it and know that it has an effect. So my prayer that we become conscious to our effect on the web of life. Amen.
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 So your question, John, was a little bit of background. Where did I grow up in? So as you said, I'm born to indigenous tribes of occupied Palestine. My village is closer to Nazareth, to Tiberias, to the Lower Galilee, in a very beautiful and sacred mountain. And I was born to tribes that used to be nomads, used to wander the land and know the land, read the book of life through nature. And with the Nakba, 1948, with the war, the majority of my tribe was massacred. And 250 people of my tribe escaped to a church and became Christians for 3 months. And this was their way to escape the murder and the slaughter that happened. And after the Nakba, they were not allowed to move anymore. They were put into a fence, forced into a village that carries also my name, Shibli. Until 1985, it was called Arab al-Slihat. And then it became Shibli as another process of land thief to take the lands that we used to belong to us. And I grew up in my childhood, before I got to know the massacres and what happened to my grandparents, I grew up inside Israel. And since I knew the Hebrew language already from a very young age, maybe another prayer that we have to add is to ask all the spirits of technology to be with us. It's an entity that needs attunement with us. So here we are. So I grew up in this environment of, I spoke Hebrew, my friends and relatives were Jewish, and I was in this illusion that we are all one and we are equal, and I have another religion, another language, but we are all one. And I woke up to a different reality. During the first Intifada, where the atmosphere was lands for peace. And I wrote this on the land day, the 30th of March, on our veranda, and I forgot about it. And a few hours after that, I was 16, and few jeeps of soldiers came to arrest me. And from that moment was the moment of my political awakening, to understand that my right to express my political thoughts are not welcomed. And this took me into a journey to understand what is actually my identity. Who are we as Palestinians? Why my parents were silent after what happened in the Nakba? Why they refused to speak? Some of them spoke things, and I must say I did not believe them, because what they described was beyond my imagination. Today, when I look into what's happening in Gaza, I come to believe that what they spoke was true. And I could not take that truth at that time. I thought that they were exaggerating. And I grew up into trying to understand what is these systems of oppression and how they are coming around me. And they don't come around me only from my political background, but just the fact that I'm born into a female body in times of patriarchy, indigenous person in times of modernity, as I said, Palestinian under the Israeli occupation, but also as a Muslim faith in times of Islamophobia. So I learned that all my identities are rejected, and yet there is, and still, a huge fountain of love going through all my veins and all my senses, and that power of love wanted to express itself. Giving birth to my daughter brought me to this place that I have to live only from within that fountain of love, not forgetting how the systems of oppression are working on me, but I had to make my work and my actions from that source of love. So far.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you, Ida. It's really touching to hear you. Maybe we can shift over to Sami and just hear the same. Like, how did your people, or what do you know of your people's history in Palestine, and how were you raised? What narrative were you raised with, and how did that lead you into peace work?
Yeah, thank you, John. And I just want to say thank you, Ida and Uri. It's so good to see you together, dear brother and sister as well. I wish I was there. The three of us would be on camera together. There's a very important point to make here, John. The point is that historically, this land is not a land that has been embedded by an intractable conflict between the peoples of this land, as many people think and perceive. That this is a conflict and a war that goes thousands of years and continues until this day. Even some claiming that this is a continuation of a war that started between the children of Abraham, Ishmael and Isaac, even though many forget they actually reconciled when they buried their father. This is a recent episode of a war that's been around 100 years. And this war exists because of a colonialist agenda, a European colonialist agenda that started with the First World War, and mainly by Britain and France, that came into this area and divided the land to achieve their own political and economic goals by creating division and conquering of this land and dividing and separating people from each other. I say this because my family actually was born and grew up in a neighborhood in Jerusalem where Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived together, lived in peace with each other, knew each other very well, celebrated festivities together, cared for their children together. My father still remembers the name of the Jewish kids that he used to play with in that neighborhood. And so this is very, very important part of history that I feel was intentionally taken out of the narrative to create this decisiveness and this narrative that we can never make peace because we have never lived in peace in this land. Specifically for the family, our family on my father's side was deeply affected by the 1948 war. As Ida said, 85% of the Palestinian population at that time was affected by that war, where we were ethnically cleansed from our homes. That war resulted in the death of my grandfather, who died from a bullet by a sniper. He wasn't involved in combat. Again, as Ida said, brings similar stories to what's happening today in Gaza for us as Palestinians. And his children, 9 children, buried the father in the courtyard of the house. And when the Jewish forces came into that neighborhood, they evicted all of the non-Jews, despite the protest of the Jewish families there that loved their neighbors, Muslims and Christians, and wanted them to stay. And we became refugees. The reason why I have committed my life to peace work, because I still believe that the majority do want peace in this land, are not in this intractable hatred and conflict, is because of my grandmother. My grandmother was a woman that, as she buried her husband and became refugees and lost everything that she owned, insisted that as a family, we will never seek revenge and retaliation for what happened to us. It will not bring her husband back. It will not bring the house that we lost back. It will not even return us if we just take revenge and retaliate against those who did this to us. At the same time, she also insisted that as a family, we will not turn our eye away from the violence and the injustice, and we will proactively seek peace and reconciliation with those who did this to us. And she taught us she taught her children and then her grandchildren from a young age that we are to be peacemakers. And for her, it was based in a very deep, profound way on her faith as a Christian. And I have to say this because one of the biggest challenges we face today in this world is how the great majority of Christians do not follow these even basic teachings of Jesus, that we are called to be peacemakers. And this is what she believed in, and this is what she taught us as children. My biggest influence on my life growing up was an uncle of mine. His name is Mubarak Awad, who in the early 80s established a center called the Palestinian Center for the Study of Nonviolence. And he began to promote Palestinian nonviolent resistance to the occupation that we in the West Bank have been living under since 1967. At the age of 12, I started participating with my uncle in his demonstrations and his protests, meeting Israeli peace activists, nonviolent activists who were standing with us as Palestinians, indirectly resisting the injustice of the occupation. And that transformed my life. So since the age of 12, I began to understand how nonviolence is empowering, how nonviolence allows me, even as a child, to do something in the face of grave violence and injustice without me being violent towards those who are perpetuating violence towards me. My uncle was arrested and deported by the Israeli government in 1988, solely because of his work in nonviolence, and that made me want to give my entire life to just being in this question: what is the power of nonviolence that makes a country that claims to be so secure and so great do this to a nonviolent peace activist? And so since that time, my life has been fully committed to the work of peace, reconciliation, and nonviolence in this land.
Thank you, Sami. Just want to acknowledge I'm feeling both grief and also inspiration hearing both you and Ida. Just taking a moment to feel that. I'm sure many of our people viewing are feeling some of that as well. And Uri, would love to turn to you. I know that you had a different upbringing, being raised as a Jewish Israeli in the Holy Land. I'd love to hear just a little bit about how your people came to the Holy Land and what narrative were you brought up with and how that led to your peace work.
So first I want to join the gratitude to Sami, to Ida, to express my love to you both. And I realize we sit a Jewish, a Muslim, and a Christian together, and it could be a beginning of a joke. And I want to celebrate it's a friendship, and it's a true friendship. And I can say this is what gives me hope in these very, very dark days. So thank you for bringing us together. And I was born just after the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt. So the whole hope and belief in peace somehow accompanied my generation. And I was part of a family, left-wing Zionist family, believed that the Jewish people have the right to live in Israel and that we need to share this land with the Palestinians. So somehow the ideas of peace, quality, were part of my childhood. And later on started an awakening process of the dream of we are the right one, we are the good ones. And it started in the age of 13, actually being exposed to hungry people in Africa. I saw a photo in a newspaper and I couldn't understand how we throw away food while children are dying. And I couldn't accept the answers that I got from my parents. And later on, it continued with the Nakba. I discovered the fact that the Zionist dream of we came to an empty land and this land was waiting for us was a lie. And this was the beginning of discovering many other lies, like the capitalistic system as a good system for all of us. And also patriarchy. I discovered how transparent it is for me, the patriarchy around me and also inside of me. I discovered how I carry racism and patriarchy and even homophobia as a queer person. So this started a journey of searching for new teachers than my parents and my teachers till then. And this has also led me here to Tamera later on, going even deeper in the research of the connection between outer and inner peace work. I hope this is an answer.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing that. I'm grateful to have the ground, and I know that the history of the region is far more complex than we can really dive into here, but it's good to have some common base. And, bringing us a little bit more current to this moment, a very common narrative of both supporters of Israeli and Palestine is that there is a right to defend or resist what is happening, and that even it's necessary to use military operations to create a change. And I'm wondering, for each of you as peace workers, like, how does this relate to your stance as a peace worker? And how has that stance changed since the events of October 7th and everything that has followed? And maybe even more poignantly, do you still believe peace is possible given the past few months? And maybe we can start with whichever one of you feels the call.
Whoever has hope.
I never stopped hoping. Can say I'm a prisoner of hope, and not hope because I can or cannot. It's a choice. It's a choice that I take it every day. But I want to go back to this place of the right to defend and the right to. These are very extreme terms, and I don't want to start from this place of difficulties, but start from this. We Palestinians, during 75 years of occupation, we tried everything, every possibility. What Sami wrote as the story of nonviolent resistance. I want to bring the Great March of Return 2018, how people in Gaza stood for culture, for music, for poetry, for dabka, and they were shot right in front of all of us. They wanted to tell us we are in prison, and they used methods of nonviolence. It is really difficult to speak about violence and force and to differentiate between them. But I want to start from a different angle. It might be a banal example, but I have a daughter, but she changed my life, and I corrected the actions of my beloved daughter when she was a child, and also still, and now as an adult, sometimes with force. So imagine my child is reaching her hand to a burning oven, and I would say, Neil, don't. and she nevertheless goes and touches the oven. And I would say, don't. And I increase my voice, and she still goes to the oven, and I love my daughter, and I see that she is harming herself. And there is a point in me as a mother, as a caretaker for life, that I allow myself to go to her and take her hands and take them back and forbid her, stop her from burning herself. Now, to the outside, this would be me forcing my power as an adult to a child, and using force, and that can be translated to violence. And I want to bring the image of love, saying, as we both now in Tamera, and we are in this frame of village of lovers, and the main question, what is the duty, the vocation of love? What is the position of love in service of peace, in service of liberation, in service of correction? For me, love is a political force. When I love, I care. When I care, I will give orientation. And my orientation also sometimes will be saying, no, like this, you're hurting yourself and hurting others. No. In the name of life and love, no, you don't do it. And if the person, my daughter, if I go back to the same example, is still keeping her, hurting herself, I will take her. I will force her not to do it. How can we use love in such an act? And don't misunderstand me of saying yes for violence. I'm asking, what is it, a place when you are in prison, when you are under pressure, and you use all terms, all ways of saying, people, word, 75 years of occupation, 16 years of the biggest prison on earth in Gaza. What do you do? I don't have answers, but saying, I will defend myself if danger is coming to me. I will defend my daughter if danger is coming to me. And I am a person who is burning in the light of love, and I don't want to use violence. I ask the world and the people, actually not to ask us Palestinians, maybe Sami has a different answer. That's also the differences between us. So what can we do? I think we did everything that it's possible. And I still have hope. I see images today of this awakening that is happening in the world, of people saying Palestine is not a topic of Palestinians. Palestine is a topic of humanity. Genocide is not our fate. It's us as humanity allowing something like this to happen. It is our duty to see people who are using force and terror on other people for so long, and people who are going beyond their needs. They are going for their wants. So I have an image inside of me as a Bedouin, which comes from the father of the Indian nation, that says, Mother Earth, life has for all of us for our needs, not our greed. So when you see people that are going for greed, wanting and having, which is the conditioning of capitalism, which is the conditioning of so many systems of oppression, and people going toward it and taking beyond their needs, can we create structures of accountability where you say to a person, to a group, to a nation that it's taking beyond its needs, wanting to say no, in the name of life, in the name of love, no. And we as humanity, we will use all what is in our hands to reorient you back to life, back to love.
Yeah, just taking a breath to let that settle. Thank you, Ida. There's a lot that stirs in me from that. I would love to turn next to you, Sami, and just hear, how does your response or stance align or differ than what Ida shared?
Yeah, thank you, Ida. For me, it's a very interesting question, and the interest in it is not the question itself; it's the fact that This is the only conflict, war, violent situation where such a question is imposed. If we look at the history of liberation movements, if we look at the history of struggles even between nations, oppressing or communities, this question is never really asked. It's never asked in South Africa. It's never asked in the civil rights movement. It's never asked in what's happening in Ukraine and Russia now, defending yourself for terrorists, for using violence, for using arms. And so, again, it feeds into that general narrative that has been created that the media, governments, and people like us fall for continuously, where I, as a Palestinian, have to justify my desire for liberation, and an Israeli has to justify their desire for security in this narrative and the question of violence. And so for me, I wish these questions would not be asked, because we are living in a world that is violent. There is violence everywhere, not just here. In the US, where you are, in all these countries that I see on the chat, there is violence happening all the time. And then we find ways to justify it, we find ways to condemn it, we find ways to ignore it. So yes, my answer to that question on a personal level is I am one who will always try his best, his utmost best, not to fall in the trap of violence. I believe that violence does not bring us anything that we aspire for as a human family or as nations living in that human family. I believe violence creates the opposite. If in this narrative or this language of defending self and the level of death and destruction that has happened in Gaza, that there is some understanding that this is going to bring peace and security, I don't even know how that will happen. And I would say for Palestinians to think that liberation and freedom will come through using violence, also that has not worked. Both sides have failed in the use of violence to achieve these things. And yes, there has been a very, very strong attempt to suppress nonviolence from manifesting, because for me, nonviolence is the more powerful force to engage, where it brings an end to any justification and excuse for the use of violence. So for me, yes, there is a way. And that brings us the need for all of us to come together and stop engaging in these sort of side conversations as if one's existence is justified or not, because there are some that believe that armed resistance is a way, or the security through violence is a way. And I fully believe that the heart that we need to bring into this conversation is the heart of love, the heart of community, the heart of coming together. The heart that also says we stand together strongly and firmly against injustice. We stand strongly in understanding that there is a power dynamic in this land that cannot be ignored, that there is an occupier and an occupied, there is an oppressor and an oppressed, there is a privileged and those who are not privileged. This is the reality that we live in, that I hope at least people listening to us cannot disagree with. And the fact that there are some Palestinians that use armed resistance or violence does not in any way negate the dynamics that we live under and have been living under for the last 75 or 100 years as well. Security can only come through real engagement in peace work, through building strong partnership, building relationships of mutual trust and respect. There can never be peace if at least there is no trust and there is no respect between the communities in this land. And this is why we keep bringing it back into the issue of love and relationships, because if there is no trust and respect, there is always war in relationships between individuals and in relationships between nations. And so the greatest work that we could do is to manifest this strong, unconditional love and commitment to peace and justice and equality in this land.
Thank you, Sami. Yeah, it's beautiful here. There's again a lot stirring. But before I go on to further questions, Erie, I'd love to hear from you. And actually, what comes to mind, Erie, is speaking a bit about your time in the PRV, the Peace Research Village, which is actually how I met the work of Tamera, and really how this whole film that unfolded the past 10 years came from my time meeting the PRV and then actually working in a refugee camp in Jordan during the Syrian civil war. And it was from reading the depth of peace research that Tamera was doing that really led me and then Ian and Julia towards making this film. And I'm wondering, from your path, like, what does that mean to you, peace research? And how does that link to your stance now as a peace worker?
So maybe I give the frame of the story that Ida and me were part of and are still part of. We came to Tamera as students in order to bring back the vision of a healing biotope to the Middle East. So in 2007, we came here, we made a big shift in our life, and we thought in 1, 2, 3 years, we have it, we know how to do peace work, and we go back as a group of Israelis, Palestinians, and also internationals to support us, to create a village of lovers in Israel. And it took us 5 years, and we moved to Israel. It was not easy at all. And after 2 years, the war in Gaza broke up, and it was 2014, and it broke us apart. So we decided to go back to Tamera, and till now, we feel that this vision is a true vision of a model of Israelis and Palestinians to nourish and to model the trust is possible. But this vision is waiting for other people to manifest. And right now we are doing our peace work here in Tamera, in Portugal. And I can say that the brother of Ida, he has a child who is the best friend of my child. And she's talking in Arabic and he's talking in Hebrew. And this is somehow what stayed from the big vision of the PRV. And for my heart, it's very meaningful that their identity and their peace work is on another level in very good conditions. I want to go back to the 7th of October and to share that my hope was shaken, and till now I am searching for hope. And my motivation to do this talk was to nourish the hope that I need right now, and I find it a lot in the friendship with Ida, with Sami. I want also to be truthful and to say after the 7th of October, our connection, Ida and me, was so shaken that for a few days, maybe for 2 weeks, we couldn't talk. I read posts that she put on Facebook and I didn't agree with the one-sided. I needed empathy for the trauma that happened to my people. I discovered in myself a level of identification and compassion, or borders of my compassion, how much I was identified with what happened on the 7th of October in Israel and how much it was hard for me to open my heart to what started to happen in Gaza since then. And I remember that we had to hold the webinar, maybe similar to this event, and we thought, can we do it? We don't talk with each other. Can we hold a public event? And we said, okay, we ask someone to hold a space for us and we bring tachlis, we bring questions to each other. Why did you write this thing? Why you are like this? And we invited the community to give witness, and 35 people came just to witness a talk between us. And with the help of a facilitator, we could open our hearts. And I remember that in the end of this talk, Ida said genocide. And I said, I understand that you call it genocide to what happens now in Gaza, but I wouldn't use this term. And for Ida, it was very important that I will understand why it's genocide, and I will use this term. And it brought me to a process of, I consulted with a friend of mine, a lawyer, and I asked him, what is the definition of genocide? What is the history of genocides? And after a few days, I could come to Ida and say, you were right. Also, the numbers were growing and are growing. And for me, it was a step of not only understand why Ida is thinking, but also to learn and to allow my heart to be touched and to allow my perspective of the Zionist, Jewish, Israeli perspective and compassion to enlarge. So, and also to Sami, I want to say, I lost 2 members of my family on the 7th of October, and Sami left me a message that it broke his heart when he heard it. And just to know that there is a Palestinian friend who shared with me this pain, this is what gives me hope in these days.
Wow. Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that I'm feeling tears, and yeah, and it's kind of interrupting my mental faculty trying to be smart about all of this. So just acknowledging that we're in terrain for me that has a lot of grief, and I'm sure, as I'm hearing, for all of you, and something that arose, I think actually Ida was first when you were speaking, is just, and it is kind of added by each of you, is just this realization that this is both this issue of violence and what's happening in Gaza and Palestine and Israel and the Holy Land and the Fertile Crescent is not, it's actually a global issue. And it's also a very deeply personal issue. And something that comes is that a lot of our audience isn't currently in the Holy Land, but many of them are probably sitting like I am here in the United States, wondering like what to do. What is my role? What is the way I can show up meaningfully right now without contributing to more division, which is what I see a lot happening here in this country. And it actually reminds me of at Tamera, one of the things that we share as filmmakers when we're talking about the film afterwards is that at Tamera, it almost never happens that a love couple will get into an argument or a conflict and just go at it one-on-one, but that almost immediately other people come, members of the village come and support, and it's almost like taboo to try to solve a conflict one-on-one, because just the experience that 2 pain bodies just tend to create that need to defend and a sense of like at times almost violence. So sitting here, it seems to me like, okay, there's a global need to lean in and also look at the bigger context for how this conflict has come to like be and what is the continued role of the US and Britain and the rest of the world in it. And so given that we now have a global audience, like what would you say, like what would you want any of us, all of us, to really sit with and consider and possibly even do as we want to support a different path of peace being possible?
I can start and be very brief. As an historian, when I look to South Africa and what stopped the apartheid there is boycotting, is isolation. So this is one part of my request. Don't allow the Israeli state to be welcome as a normal state in the family of states in the world. This is one very clear statement And the other one is the opposite of it, is to say there are radical groups, individuals, movements in Israel. Please nourish it, and please encourage any possibility of coming together of Israelis and Palestinians. I just listened to a podcast a few days ago, and it was about empathy. And I discovered that empathy is biological. It's not about educating to be empathy. We have it. We just have it. We are born with the ability to feel with the other, to risk our life for the other. It's part of our genetic. And they also discovered in the research about rats, and I don't justify research with rats, but I was very happy to hear that when a rat see another rat which is in prison, immediately they try to support. Immediately they feel stress because they see someone else in stress. If the rat is black and the other rats were raised only in white rats, they will not have this empathy. This was mind-blowing and devastating. They will not try to rescue the black rat which is in prison. But after 2 weeks of having common space between the white rats and the black rats, it's enough in order the white rats to rescue any black rats, even without knowing each other. Having said this, just to encourage any space that can expand the compassion and the knowing of Israelis and Palestinians together. I can say this was a very big key for my political awakening.
Thank you. Maybe I tie to what Uri just said, and also just to share with you the feeling that I have when Uri says to boycott Israel, and knowing that in the stage where we are now, I cannot say it publicly because I will be arrested. And I tell you, I was not in Palestine since June, and I'm missing my family, and I'm afraid to go there. So just to say, again, what Sami brought about privilege and power, but thank you for saying it. Whew. I want to take another angle, which is also this talk, this conversation, which is really precious. It focused so much on Israelis and Palestinians, Israel and Palestine, that local conflict. And I want to remind us that this is another expression of the global systems that are on play. It has a specific details in Israel-Palestine, but I want us to remember the global context of how the systems of oppression are working, and they have an interest to evoke fear, to keep the industry of weapons, the industry of so many interests in that location and in other locations. So when you ask how can the global community be in solidarity of what's happening there, I would say look into your backyard. What is happening and where are you allowing the systems of oppression to happen? Patriarchy, capitalism, white supremacy, imperialism, all of the colonialism. Look at your backyard and your own behaviors. How is it in your daily life you are supporting systems of consumerism that support capitalism that needs resources, that looks into the Fertile Crescent, which is called the Middle East, which is a colonial term, and keep using that place. I mean, just the information that a lot of what's happening there is about resources, about the natural gas, about the lines of commercials, because they are supporting your lifestyle, our choices in the daily life. Many people look into it as they say one-sided, two-sided. Now we, the three of us, might look like one side. Yes, we are one side. We are on the side of life. If there is one side, Israeli side or Palestinian side, if there's one life, one story that it's one side of it, it's that people with for life and people without for not for life. So I ask you, no matter what is your identity, your born identity, join the side for life, and don't join it against those who are against life, but try to find ways to awaken them and call them back to life, to love. And we have so much knowledge of knowing how to call back to love, to life. One line is creating communities that are sustainable, that they are not depending on systems of extraction. In this time of the genocide in Gaza, I had a dream, and the dream came actually from Jewish people, because the main actor in this dream, I've tried to say it briefly, because personally I believe in the Nefesh Yehudiya, that the Jewish soul. It's something in me. I don't know where does it come from, other lifetimes, but I have a deep belief that when that Jewish soul will awaken back to its position in life, something dramatically will happen. And in my dream, lots of young people, especially Jewish people from the US, from Churchill Island, but also from Germany, from many places, took their right to move and travel to Israel, Palestine. They went to their families, they spoke to their families, and they created a caravan of food and aid, and they drove through the soldiers to Gaza. And the soldiers in the beginning were like, no, and wanted to shoot them, but then they saw that these are their relatives. And so the dream is long, I make it short. They arrived to the heart of Gaza, and they leave the aid, and the hungry kids come and take it, but the second day they come again. And then the Gaza people with dignity show up, and a grief ceremony, a grief circle. Everybody was looking, whoa, what have we done? What have we all done? And that created a movement. And the main thing that while this was happening, there was ceasefire, there was no more killing. So I think that each one of us has a task and has a certain responsibility of mobilizing ourselves toward life, toward love. And each one of you, if you listen enough to your heart, to your loving heart, you will find. I don't think that I'm able to give suggestions or solutions. I think each one of us need to find these moments of saying, it is one of the most terrific moments of history, and I need to look to myself in the mirror and know that I took a stand for life. I imagine I don't want to call it an army, but a group of 100,000 women dressed in white goes to these wounded places that are with conflict and war, and they are from all races, ages, and colors, and they stand in these wounded places in the middle of war, stand for life and sing and call the local people to join them. And imagine such a group anchored in love, anchored in taking side for life. What's the impact of them in the border of Gaza? A huge impact.
That image, yeah, thank you, Ida. That image is so beautiful. I'm really hearing, Erie, you started with talking about boycott and divestment, and drawing on the example of apartheid South Africa and how that ended. And then Ida, I'm hearing you asking for us to look in our own backyards and recognize this as a global issue and come together in communities and come together in grief. And what would visions really people coming together from their anchored hearts in love and in their anchored hearts of really heartbreak together, so that, maybe something else, a different kind of movement could happen. And I think, Sami, that brings me to the question really of liberation. If you want to also speak to the last question as well in that, but something that I'm also tracking in this conversation, I'm also tracking some of the comments in the chat, is that I've heard in this talk thus far that there is a need to speak out And there is a need sometimes to take actions such as boycotting or divestment. But at the same time, those actions can feel aggressive or can create divisions. I certainly feel it here. And my question is, what innerly, and I guess also outerly, how do we stand in liberation to stand up for truth and create boundaries and borders? Even Ida, going back to your example of needing to grab your daughter's hand away from the hot fire, like, how do we stand for the necessary actions and borders without causing more division, with truly creating liberation? Maybe Sami, if you have some ideas, and then can also go back to any of you about, like, what is that stance of liberation coming from love? Sami, I think you're muted somehow.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
There you go.
I just want to say thank you for asking another question, because my answer was going to be fully aligning with what Aida and Uri said for the first one. And I just want to add a little part of it, which Aida said this word, which I think is very important, which is responsibility. And people need to take responsibility for what is happening, especially in countries that have engaged in supporting the tremendous violence and atrocities that are happening in this land. This is done in your name. Your governments are acting in your name. Your governments are using your tax dollars to support and to continue this genocide and aggression against the Palestinians. And so I think it's very, very important, this word responsibility. People, individuals need to take responsibility, and responsibility needs to be taken without fear. I think one of the things that hinders us most when it comes to liberation and freedom of others is fear. And I know this. I feel this. I see this. Many people in the United States especially are afraid of simply criticizing Israel because of accusations of being called anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish or neo-Nazi or whatever label they might be given. And so let's not forget that this is a tool that is being used also to limit the ability of freedom of individuals to express their opinion. And so we cannot be motivated by fear when it comes to liberation, when it comes to freedom of those who are suppressed. We cannot be motivated by fear of the African American community when it comes to giving them full rights within the context of the United States, or those who come as refugees from other countries to Europe and be afraid of them and limit them. We need to create spaces of deep healing and deep reconciliation for these communities and us to take place. And so those who are in power, those who are in privilege, will always have fear of losing it. Absolutely. I mean, that's almost normal, that those who are living a certain lifestyle, living a certain way, oppressing others or not, but they're still benefiting from what is happening, will always be afraid of losing it. It takes a few courageous people, in my opinion, like Uri and others, Israelis and Jews around the world, who are standing up very, very strong and saying, yes, we understand that maybe some of our privilege will be lost, but if that means helping others rise up, it's worth it. It is worth it. And this is what we need to create together. So for me, yes, we all have the right to live in freedom and dignity and respect. And we all have the right to live in security, to build our families, to build our communities, to create new communities. This is what the PRV was about. This is the dream that still continues until this day by many Palestinians and Israelis have, that we could create this model of Palestinians and Israelis coming and living together to show the world, to show our communities that it is possible, and not just possible, it is the way, it is the better way. So for me, yes, this question of freedom is one that is very important, and those who limit freedom are the ones who are afraid of losing the privilege that they have. And I know that sometimes, as I said, it's very difficult for people who are in privilege to lose, who are in power, to give up their power. And this is why Martin Luther King always insisted that before resistance, before nonviolent resistance, engage in dialogue, talk to people, express your grievance to them, let them know. And then sadly, I have to say this in a deep, sad way, that most Israelis have no idea what is happening to the Palestinian community and the violence that is perpetuated against the Palestinians by their government and military and settlers. They really have no idea. The media today in Israel does not show a single image of what is happening in Gaza to Palestinians. So yes, people need to engage, people need to find the resources, people need to understand that this privilege they're living is built on the blood of other communities, and it's not worth it. My freedom will result in even greater freedom for Israelis, greater security for Israelis. And this false logic that Palestinian freedom is a threat to Israeli security is a lie that only wants people to remain in fear. And once you're in fear, you give up your power to those authorities to use and manipulate you in any way they want. This is what we saw happen after 9/11. This is what we see happen after October 7th. This is what we see happen in all our communities. Fear is the greatest motivation so far of human behavior. And when we bring love fully, true love, unconditional love, love that breaks all fear, this is what will create the revolution to come.
Yeah, thank you, Sami. Feeling that. I also want to welcome our viewers. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat. We'd love to pull some up and also bring your questions or dialogue into the space. And as that happens, kind of basing on what Sami was just saying, and really things I've heard all of you say, maybe I want to ask a bit more of a vulnerable question now, but I'd love for any of you that feels comfortable to speak about, like, what is each of your personal edges right now as a peace worker, as somebody trying to find that place to really fully come from like love. I know that Uri, you shared a bit about your journey with Ida, and just anything you each want to share of like, how are you being personally challenged right now? And what is that asking of you as your own next step of evolution on this path of peace and love?
Begum. I would like to share a very vulnerable inner space that has been happening in me for the last 4 months, and actually every time that there is an escalation happening in my homeland. I mean, for the context, you all know by now that I live in Tamera. I'm a teacher in the law school. I'm holding spaces for activists, a community pillar, and I enjoy a lot of privilege here, love, security, the best atmosphere that I can ask for myself to grow in. And I am loved by people. I am respected. I am seen. And every time that, especially in the last 4 months, when people touch my body or say, "Ida, I love you," there's a deep doubt that comes through my body, through my soul, and like a voice that is screaming, "How can you love me personally and kill my collective? How can you love me personally and erase all my identities? How can you love me? How can I receive your love from my partner? Like all the love." And I look at his eyes and I feel like it can't be that you love me personally and the whole world is seeing all of my identities being erased, and there's silence. And these are the moments where where it's just so the inner becomes so dark and so pain and so vulnerable, and these are the moments that I have to go back and use all the possibilities that the community offers, and my spiritual life offers, and my political understanding and knowing, and it's been a path of hell to every day stand for my humanity, for every day reminding myself I am human, I am loved, I am seen. Actually, it's not every day, it's every minute, every second, every even in between every letter of every word of every sentence that I'm saying now. That doubt of how can I as one person be seen and loved and protected while all my identities being erased and genocide. And how is it to speak to my daughter words of love and confront her that the world is like this, and me, my daughter lives in Berlin, me asking her in these times of so much darkness in Germany, actually to hide her Palestinian identity, which means for years I'm working on her to grow to her political identity. Now, as the act of self-protection, I ask her, don't show, don't, it's not needed now. And I feel so ashamed of it.
Thank you, Ida, so much for sharing. It's so courageous of you to share that honestly. And I feel that's the kind of dialogue I've experienced at Tamera. And I think it's that kind of vulnerability that gets under just the masks and the identities of how we're supposed to act or speak or be, but to really like, what is our edge to really open and receive, and just being with truth. You know, one of the biggest principles I've learned from Tamera is that essentially a culture of truth is like a necessary path along the way to a peace culture. So just honoring the beauty of your truth. Yeah.
I want to link here and to say how it is connected to love. I want to bring it again to love, that what brought us together. Because we are so used to think about love as a structure of not allowing truth. Yeah? We put love in a structure of marriage, and also as a child, I was raised up to believe that I can love only women, although I love men. And I can love only one person, although I can love more than one person. And if I would be raised in a certain society in Israel, I would believe that I can love only Jewish people. I can get married only with Jewish people. What a crazy idea to separate truth and love when they actually belong to each other. So I want to say my edge I mentioned before, to see how much I'm still identified with my identity, with the Jewish people, with the Israeli people, and on the other side also to feel the shame as an Israeli and to feel the terrible guilt that comes with the responsibility to what happens now. I also mentioned the collapse of hope as a peace worker, as an edge. And connected to truth, I want to add, I still, in my Facebook account, I wouldn't use the word genocide, although I can share with you, my friends, and I don't know how many people are watching, I can share, and still I am afraid to lose my family, my friends, that I know that when I use the word genocide or when I name the things or to talk about boycott, I'm also afraid. I'm also, I don't know how to be truthful and in the same time not to create war, not to create separation. I still insist of somehow to include friends and family and people who think different than me, and I don't want to lose them by being totally truth. One edge.
Anything you want to add to that before I... Oh, sorry, I think I was muted. Just saying thank you, Uri, for that, and asking Sami if there's anything you want to add before I pull a few questions from the chat here.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief as well. I think this question of the edge is very important, because I think part of our presence in this gathering today, maybe unlike other times, is not to create a false sense of hope and inspiration to those who are watching and listening to us. We've been in so many circles where at the end of them, or so many speeches where at the end of them, people come up to us and say, wow, that was so inspiring, you moved me. And then I think it's very important for us to acknowledge that we are living in very, very difficult times, in very, very challenging times, as the peace movement, as people who are committed for real peace in this land, not just the politicians reaching some political agreement, but real peace that's based on justice and equality and rights for all the people that live in this land, from the river to the sea, as they say. And in one way, you know, so like Charles Dickens, remembering reading this, or it is the worst of times, but at the same time, it could also be the best of times, because it's the time, as bad as it is really exposing the work that we have to do. The work that I think Ida initially said we lived an illusion of. We created some sense of normalization to an occupation that has been present for us for so many decades, and not seeing and not being aware of this sort of lava that is boiling underneath us all, that erupted, but it was always there. Racism was always there. Demonizing was always there. Privilege was always there. It came up in small signs, and I'm not saying by who, different communities in this land. And now it's there. And now that everything has exposed, this is why I say this is an opportunity for us to engage. Now we see the level of violence that people can commit, and we could say no more. Enough is enough. This needs to stop. And it's not just calling for a ceasefire, it's a call for justice in this land, to the peoples of this land. It is a call to dismantle the systems and the structures of power, and even ideologies that show one side as better than the other just because of who they belong to and what ethnicity or religion they are part of. And so it means more work for us, for sure. I don't think the three of us are going to have early retirement anytime soon. At the same time, I say this is the work. Now we know. A new language needs to be created. A new movement needs to happen. New actions need to take place. Coming together in circles need to be much stronger now, much more with intention, not just to come and be together. Now, what are the conversations? To be in the uncomfortness of it, I think, is key, that we need to engage in and allow this uncomfortness to happen and to be held. Just like Uri said, like for him to be in a place where he's sharing his heart out and be rejected, he knows he has a family that's going to hold him. We are there to hold him and not to dismiss him. And so a new paradigm needs to emerge. So yes, it's the worst of time, but in all the atrocities and violence, and I say this on a personal level, I have family in Gaza. I have my mother's family in Gaza that I've been trying since the beginning to get them out. And they are in despair. They call begging me to help them. And at the same time, I say, yes, all of this is creating an opportunity for us to fully commit and engage. And again, as we've been saying, coming from the heart of love. I can engage in nonviolent resistance from a heart of hatred. So it's not to say nonviolence or violence. I can be nonviolent and be filled with hatred. What we need to engage in is clean the heart, come from that heart of love, and engage in the activism and the actions and the vision that we need for all of us.
Thank you, Sami. Yeah. There's some questions coming through about resources, which I think we'll touch on at the very end, because people would love resources to know where to give financially, to know how to boycott and where, and things such as this. But this moment, actually, a question that came up and kind of drawing on a few of the questions coming from the audience. You know, there's a question, like Sami, kind of building what you were saying around, like, what would a joint Palestinian, Israeli, and even I'd say international peace movement look like? Like, how could we come together and unify? So there's that question. And with that, I'd say, because I heard you, Sami, talking about the discomfort, which I wholly agree with. And personally, I feel like we need to come together in grief ritual. And Gabriel, our dear friend, who is from, I think, Israel as well, that I know from Tamera, has been asking about joy. He's asking, in such excruciating times of death and massacre, does joy protection have a place in the liberation through love? So I'm wondering, kind of both those questions mixed in. One is like, what would a really unified movement look like? And does joy, or how can joy, is it wrong for joy to be there? Or like, how would joy play in? You're muted. I think you need to repeat whatever you said, Erie, because you were muted.
I said that I think it's for Sami because it came from Gabriel, his good friend.
Well, I am reading the text, and my rabbi, Lynn Gottlieb, said the movement is happening. And this is what she wrote in the messages, and I fully support it. The movement is already happening. People are coming together. People are standing up. People are breaking the barriers of fear. And I honor specifically the Jewish community around the world that are saying enough is enough. This is being done in our name, and we no longer accept it. And so for me, this is the amazing sign that it is happening, and we need to come together. And yeah, I mean, we don't have much time, but I fully believe that the core of this movement is not about finding a political solution. Part of what we have been sharing and continue to believe in for many, many years is that we need to transcend political solutions, because political solutions still create division, create the us and the them, and then create separation and potential for more violence. For me, the core of the movement is a movement that works hard and engaging in nonviolent resistance to achieve justice and peace and reconciliation and the recognition of all the equal rights of the people in this land, and those who are not in this land to have the same rights as the people who are here. This is, for me, is core. Once we create that foundation, that basic foundation, then we could say, yes, what is a political framework that can honor the diversity of who we are in our cultures and communities? That, yes, we cannot be one in that sense, but the basic foundation is justice, peace, and equal rights for all those who live in this land. Once we reach that, this is what, for me, the movement is about. And we need to engage in whatever tools we have, nonviolent tools that really promote and engage in achieving this. And for me, yes, celebration is part of the movement of liberation. This is what the South African liberation movement was about. This is what the civil rights movement was about. There was singing and there was joy and celebration, but they never allowed that celebration to take over the full commitment and the full danger of also engaging in the hard conversations and the hard actions as well.
Thank you, Sami. Yeah, Ida, please.
I think that the strength of the joint peace movement and peace movement in general is to be anchored in a vision that knows what is after occupation. What is the day after? So if I'm looking for ceasefire, and I've been waging demonstrations here in Portugal for, a lot for ceasefire till I fed up with it, because I understood that people don't have an image for what is after ceasefire. If you don't include in ceasefire that you want to see free Palestinians, then ceasefire is too small. If only resisting the occupation and I don't have an image, a vision of how is my life, my daily life and my daily actions and resources and way of living will look after the occupation. The peace movement needs to have a vision for peace. What is peace? And I do agree with Sami, justice and reconciliation. And as a person, I've been for the majority of my life calling for justice till I understood that sometimes justice can stand in the way of reconciliation. So if you would ask me, what do I want now? I want reconciliation and then justice, because I know that reconciliation will lead us to justice. Asking for justice now won't lead us to reconciliation. But for this, I need to know what is my vision for a peaceful life. What is to invest on what is peace? Is it just the lack of war? What is my vital energies? How is my dreams and visions and life is happening? And I think that for the peace movement to come to this accountability, that the whole illusion that we've been eating for many years, which is win-win game, it does not exist. It exists in the market. If I have ice cream and you have money, I give you my ice cream, you give me money, win-win, we are both win. But to come to win-win in a structure that is for so many years built on inequality and power dynamics and privilege won't lead us not to reconciliation and not to win-win. So again, to what Sami brought before, that each one of us as peace seekers ask what I am ready to give up, give away in order to achieve peace. And there we would come to places that some of you will be forced to lose privilege, to lose some of the accumulation that you had. And that's a step for reconciliation. So I think that we have to be pragmatic. The system of war is so coherent, so well organized. Where are we as a peace movement? Are we well organized, knowing each other, loving each other, but actually coherent with each other? So we need to invest on a lot. And I don't think that despite the pain and the despair that also comes in my heart again and again, and I have to heal it with realistic hope, not that toxic hope that we keep doing the same things that we've been doing and hoping that different results will come, but a realistic hope, because I live in a place that gives a hint towards realistic hope. And so in these places I don't agree that we failed, but I would say all the training that we've been preparing for is to be used now. All the tools of reconciliation, all the tools of knowing love and practicing love are needed now. So I have a dear call to all peace workers in the world. Come, rise, unite, show yourself, organize yourself. Because we are speaking about genocide. We are speaking about 100,000 people. You know, it's like when I focus on the numbers and I want to add the 1,000 in Israel. Yeah, 101,000 people killed, and children sleeping in the mud, and diseases spreading. We are speaking about something so real, and we have the possibility to do something. beyond online summits and this, each one of us is so empowered to do something. Prayers, grief circles, but also actions. Lots of actions. I have a huge list of actions that we can do. We can. We are able. The system have been telling us for so many years, you're small, you can't. We can. Yes, we can. Sorry, it was a slogan for one of your elections, but we can.
I see some comments in the chat, and I want to express my pain also of I'm not in peace with losing people who say it's so one-sided. I still try to insist to put us together on one boat and to say, I still disagree with some of the people, of the things that Ida says, some of the numbers, and it's fine. Can we still not saying this is one-sided? Can we still see us as one side of peace seekers, knowing that we have different ways, sometimes different language, different strategies, and still stay together, united, or at least in solidarity, knowing that we are searching together for alternative to the horror that happens right now. Just to say, it breaks my heart to read Israeli people, Jewish people, I don't know, who are losing us who are losing us. I don't want to lose you. And maybe also connected to the issue of resources. In order not to have this talk as the last talk, I want to make an advertisement. Also because I believe in community, and I want to say I don't believe we will heal this trauma alone in front of the computer. So when we say unite, when we say organize, we can say community desires, become a community, come together. And I want to offer two frames that can make this conversation continue. One is by my sister Shamba and Mira Awad, not Mira Awad, Dina Awad, a Palestinian Israeli woman who created cards for Eti Hilsum, a Jewish woman who was murdered in the Holocaust. And I think we talked about the Nakba, we didn't mention the Holocaust as another trauma that needs to be healed in order us to step out of this cycle of perpetrator and victim. So they are holding an online course inspired by Eti Hilsum, who can teach us that also in the days of horror, we can stay with the light. So this is one recommendation. And the other one is Introduction to Love School, an online course that we start in Tamera in 2 weeks. And again, to see the connection of how we learn about love and how we create structures of oppressions around us. This is an invitation to continue this dialogue.
Wow. Just thank you. Thank you, First Ida, for your passionate speech and declarations. Feel you, and I feel people resonating in the chat. And thank you, Uri, for giving some real world like next steps. And maybe, I kind of feel like maybe Uri, that was like a closing statement for you. And then I want to pass this briefly because I know we're a little bit past time, but yet we want to have this come to a culminating moment in a way that feels true. So I'm wondering, Sami, if first you want to share just like any closing thoughts, and also people are really asking for resources of knowing where to divest and boycott, or knowing where to support, or where to look up more things, and then pass it to you, Ida, as the last word on your end, of anything else that you just want to share, or any other resources you want to point towards.
Yeah, I mean, just also for the lack of time, there's a lot of resources on the internet. There are different sites that people can go to and search. So it doesn't take much for people to find whatever they need to find when it comes to what actions they need to engage in. So it's very available online. I would also say connect locally with your community. I fully want to acknowledge what Ida said. This is something that we say all the time. What is happening here is part of a global pandemic. Violence is everywhere. And if you think you are safe and secure and happy where you are mistaken. This what's happening here can happen to you wherever you are in your communities. And we see this. Fascism is rising in different parts of the world. Racism is rising. Sexism, all these isms are rising in different parts of the world. And so that means we need to engage. We need to work in bringing this peace within our communities. So I urge you to connect with your community, go beyond having the token friend, build deep relationships with people. That's the funniest thing. Oh, I know a Palestinian, or I know a Jew that I went to a synagogue once. That's not peacemaking. Make an effort, get out of your comfort zone, and seek real peace and building again these relationships of trust and respect with your communities wherever you are. So activism is what happens in your neighborhood, not like Ida said, what happens online. You cannot come here, engage in your neighborhood, see who you are afraid of, and go take the step and meet them and build relationships with them.
I also am aware of the lack of time and the lack of typing what I want to share with you as resources, but also Sami say that when I want to know, I will find the information. And so I encourage you, really don't copy what the other is doing. Follow your question, follow your research, and ask your goddess and your ancestors, what can I do? And then it will appear in your screen, and you will find it. And I do want to say this term again, Uri, communitarize, like becoming community, becoming what happened between me and Uri in the beginning of the war, and this conflict that was between us was able to be healed on the foundation of more than a decade of working together, fighting together. I could disagree with him a lot, but we created that foundation of because of that trust and that love. I can disagree with you and still protect you with all my bones and cells, but still disagree with you. And that's the deep connections that we need in these moments. But again, I want to say the occupation is part of bigger systems of oppression. See what are you nourishing in your daily life, which systems of oppression you are nourishing. And Uri, I'm sorry, I will disagree with you saying, well, I want to hold these ones who are maybe falling. I will say when we embark on a new path, you will lose some people and you will gain new friends. But that we always lower our visions and our actions to the lower dominator between us, because some of our friends and families are traumatized, and trauma being instrumentalized and locked in fear. That will lock my wings, that will lock my voice to stand for life. No. So to those who will hate me or not love me or not like my words, I would say, forgive me and I forgive you, and let's ciao. But I invite those who are ready to stand with me for life and for the life of everything, and not only human, for every aspect of life. Because one of our main diseases that we are so human-centered. There's so much life that we need to be protected. Don't stand for people in Gaza. Stand for the rivers and the trees and all the fungus and the cats and the dogs that were killed there in Gaza and in Israel also. See how the system and how the government of Israel raped and wrote your right to grieve. For what happened the 7th of October, to sit for Shiv'ah, 7 days of grief and calculation, what happened? No, an action, retaliation was, and since then the ghosts of these 1,000 people that were killed in 7th of October are around Israel, are hunting people because there was no grief. And now take this to 100,000 Palestinians that have no respect to be buried now. Every second, every minute, a child is losing one of his limbs. amputated without anesthesia. Think about these ghosts and then ask, what can I do? But in a deep request, what can I do? And I'm sure a voice of nature, a voice of life will come to you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Ida. Thank you, Sami. Thank you, Uri. I just want to highlight again that what is so inspiring here for me is sitting with you three and feeling the ability to disagree, to have different opinions and voices and stances, but yet remain in this general feeling of solidarity. And, that is a stance, I think, of peace work that we believe in, so I just want to thank you so much for coming here as honestly and vulnerably and authentically as you have. And that we're going to send out an email to all of the people who've been here and all the people who registered watching the recording. And we will share resources from each of you. Anything that you want to add, we will share so that people can find you. If you want to reach out, if you want to share your email, you can just talk to us and we will share what feels good. And I just want to also say that we're going to continue this type of dialogue starting Saturday for 5 days with our cry from the Future Summit, and also our film, A Village of Lovers, featuring the story of Tamera and beyond, is going to be streaming starting tomorrow for 7 days. And that's a really good, I think, basis for understanding more depth around what this different perspective of peace work founded in solidarity with all life really is. And just say thank you to all the people out there listening, sharing yourself on the chat. We really honor you. We hear you. We've been tracking it. And we look forward to engaging more. And we're going to do these type of talks once a month for the unforeseeable future. So we'd love to have you back. Maybe we lost Sami, but thank you, Sami, wherever you've gone. Thank you both. And just ending with a prayer that just these words here in our presence can really go out to all the beings right now in need, from Gaza to Israel to just spreading across this planet, and that our actions in our heart here have a ripple, and we can know that and really feel that support and that truth. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Shukran.
Sure.